He's a voice of reason in our generation. Elijah Israel Chanak is the ambidextrous man I was referring to earlier. He's a globally renowned minister, scholar, and activist who has a message on how to hear from God in a world full of distractions. Elijah, thank you for joining us.
So good to see you, Uncle Muyiwa.
Now, it's nice you saying Uncle Muyiwa, but I know I don't ever see you. The only time I've seen you in the last 5 years was at the Houses of Parliament when you were you were rolling with the MPs.
February? Yeah, around February, yeah.
So we only see you with powerful people.
I'm screaming now.
But Elijah, it's such a joy to be here with you. And I have to say, whilst we're on camera, it's you're an absolute blessing. You bring joy to our hearts. But, you know, this is not time for family outpourings. Let's get to work.
Yes, sir.
You are known as a prophetic voice, not just in the UK, but here in America and globally. So I want to get some thoughts from you on the state of our hearing. Not just young people, but older people, because you switch on your social media, which you use very, very well, very powerfully. And there is Prophet A, who's speaking, and Prophet B comes along and says Prophet A actually has got it wrong. But, you know, we don't know who's who. Most people don't know who's who. We gravitate to the most erudite and the one that links the Greek and the Hebrew. And sometimes I've seen you do a critique of what people have to say, and you show historical material. There is one, actually, let me not go there yet. Let me not go here. So what's the state of our hearing from what you see as a minister that travels the world?
Well, I would say Ecclesiastes is a really key text when we consider this, that there is nothing new under the sun. So any challenge that we are facing today, we can study throughout history, whether it's biblical times or even extra-biblical societies. We can see that we are facing the same similar challenges. And I would say we're facing a Deuteronomy 13 and 18 challenge. What is that? In Deuteronomy 18, the scriptures speak of us not fearing the prophets who speak presumptuously and they essentially don't see the results. So in other words, they're inaccurate or their words don't come to pass. We shouldn't fear them. But then many people focus on that as the basis of false prophecy, but that was only a branch to a root. The root of false prophecy is found in Deuteronomy 13. And Deuteronomy 13 says that if anyone comes to you with a sign or a wonder, and they teach you to go after other gods, saying, let us worship them, gods that you have not known, they are not to be followed. And that's the key thing. The key thing in that text is it said that the sign and wonder can come to pass. So just because someone is demonstrating signs and wonders, miracles, the scriptures actually in the New Testament call them lying signs and wonders. And I think so we're facing a challenge now where there is a demonstration of supernatural expression, but it is self-serving. It focuses on our agenda, our lives, our purposes, our interests. As the book of Philippians says, where our belly is our God, it's serving our personal appetite and is not bringing us into the full maturity of what God's purpose is. Ephesians 4 tells us what the purpose of apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers is, and that is to bring us into maturity, to grow us into the fullness of Christ, to grow us into the head. So I think the challenge that we are facing today with our hearing is that we are hearing according to our own interests and desires. And 2 Thessalonians tells us, forgive me for being a walking Bible with this, but 2 Thessalonians tells us that whenever you see false teachers arise or false prophets arise, that they are always sent because people have not loved righteousness. So a false prophet is the fruit of a false heart. It's never the other way around. It's never that deceivers rise up and turn hearts. It's that hearts are already turned. And so we're seeing that the false prophets that we're seeing arise, you have a false prophet for every human desire, a false prophet for every human interest. And so the challenge we have in our generation is because of the plethora of lusts, the plethora of desires, the insatiable appetite for human and personal greatness, there is an abundance of liars.
So interesting thesis you have on this. And one of the things I'm grateful for is that you walk with the Bible.
Yes, sir.
So when you make a statement, you back it up. But the challenge then for us is, how do I know God's desire if I'm struggling to know Him?
Yeah.
So for those of us who consume content on Instagram, and you know, there's so many platforms now you get messages on. What should be our first stop so that we are able to know which is of God and which is not of God? How do I do this journey of actually knowing this God better? Because the prophetic words is cool, because they say it's going to rain and it starts to rain. Yeah. You know, they say, you know, and anyhow, let me know.
Revelation 19:10 tells us something wonderful. The Apostle John encounters an angel, and he bows down to worship this angel. And the angel says, I am of your brothers, the prophets. Do not worship me, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. This angel rebukes his adoration of the prophetic expression and tells him to worship God. And that goes back to Deuteronomy 13, because it's always been a worship issue. It's always been a worship issue. Even with Eve, she was faced with a choice. Do you obey the voice of God to Adam, or do you obey the voice of your desires and your impulses? We're always going to be challenged with this worship issue. True, the way that we can discern ultimately what is of God and what is not of God is what it causes us to submit to. Who are we primarily submitting to? Are we primarily submitting to our own interests and our own desires, or are we seeking after what pleases the Lord? Are we seeking after what His ultimate desire is? Because the Bible says it like this, that when that the Lord will cause us, that when our ways please the Lord, that He will give us the desires of our heart. It starts with when our ways please the Lord. Why? Because when we please the Lord, when our ways begin to please the Lord, He gives us what to want. He gives us what to want. And so there has to be an exchange. True prophetic ministry is going to draw us to a place of exchanging our will for His will. And Jesus demonstrates that in the garden. You know, we rehearse Easter, or we call it Easter in the West, but it's really Passover in the original Hebrew tongue. We rehearse this every single year, but we always start on the cross and we don't start in Gethsemane.
Listen, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, stay with us, because there's so much more to explore.
Yes.
Don't go away. We have more with Elijah after the break.